Ladies and gentlemen, this session is sponsored by Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. Please welcome Steve Ballmer, co-founder of Ballmer Group and owner of the Los Angeles Clippers, and Arn Tellem, vice chairman of Pistons Sports and Entertainment and chair of the 2022 Mackinac Policy Conference.
This is very exciting for me. I'm honored to be sitting here with one of Michigan's favorite sons. I don't have to say this, but I'm going to say all these things. Former Microsoft CEO, owner of the Los Angeles Clippers, and founder of the Ballmer Group, the one and only Steve Ballmer. When I asked Steve if he would come back to Michigan and attend this conference, he didn't hesitate. I sent him an email, and I figured I'll never hear from him. Within less than 10 minutes, he responded and said, "I'm in." Steve has never forgotten his Michigan roots. He's a true Michigander, and his Midwest spirit he's never lost, and it shined through his remarkably successful business career, helping to take Microsoft from a startup to a tech giant. In 2015, after he stepped down from Microsoft, he founded the Ballmer Group, and he continues to give back.
Co-founded with my lovely wife, Connie.
I wasn't going to forget you, Connie, I promise.
Sorry.
I'm married to we have a partner too. I understand.
Sorry.
And his philanthropic commitment to their philanthropic commitment to Detroit, and in creating opportunity and impacting communities through economic mobility and promoting efforts that promote safe and stable families, education, and career opportunities. I'm extremely honored to call Connie and Steve friends, and we are really fortunate that our paths continue to cross in the NBA. Steve's a true innovator. He's always operated on fact-based decision-making. And I gotta say, his energy and passion that he brings to everything that he does always engages and inspires. He grew up in Detroit and Farmington Hills. He's a graduate of Detroit Country Day, and he attended the Michigan of the East, Harvard. It's great that he and Connie are here to share this. We're thrilled to have him back here. And I want to also acknowledge Kylie Mitchell-Wells, the Executive Director of the Ballmer Group for Southeast Michigan. And I have to say, Kylie, we just went to Akron, Ohio to see the I Promise School together. Have someone better representing you here in Southeast Michigan. So let's start at why are you here? Is this your first, Mackinac. Is this your first time in Mackinac? I know you grew up here in Michigan.
Yeah, it's actually my third time, despite having grown up in the Detroit area. 1961, before most people in this room were born, we made a family trailer vacation up in northern Michigan. Our youngest son went to the University of Michigan, and on the saddest day, the day you go empty nester with your last child, we dropped him in Ann Arbor, came up here, and had a hell of a time.
Well, I wanted to share a little picture of your youth.
Oh, God.
Do you remember that guy?
I do remember that
I think that's
guy.
your high school graduation photo.
It is.
From Country Day. Lines that Paul Simon wrote in a song, I think it was The Boxer. You know, after changes upon changes, we are more or less the same. So looking back in your youth, your formative years, I wanted to know how it shaped your life, what you took from Michigan growing up here with your family, and just growing up in Michigan, and how it affected your, impacted your life going forward?
Yeah. No, I actually, as a child, had one other, we had to move. My dad was with Ford. My dad was an immigrant from Switzerland. My mom grew up in Detroit. And so we moved with Ford on one occasion, came back, and it was great. You could say I didn't know much else, but I'd lived someplace else, and I loved it here. We started in Oak Park, wound up in Farmington Hills. I went to Eleanor Roosevelt Elementary School, which I think is a yeshiva now. I went to East Junior High, and I worked at Franklin Hills as a caddy a couple summers. Took some classes at Lawrence Tech, so I feel pretty deeply grounded here. Besides the fact my mom would tell me many stories of the old days, like learning how to drive in the Eastern Market, which today would sound like kind of a crazy thing, but her dad would take her out there and they'd try it in the parking lot. I will say things have changed. When my mom was sick with cancer in 1997, we came back and we drove around and saw all the houses she had ever lived in as a girl, down on 12th Street, on Linwood, on Webb. When I came back after my mom had died, maybe 10 years later, every one of those houses had been vandalized and torn down. And the city has changed. I remember very well the riots in 1967, and yet I feel the city is, I'll say the area, because I grew up in suburbs, obviously. I feel this great sense of renaissance, no pun intended, in Detroit and in the area, and that makes me really happy. I know it's hard, it'd be a big comeback effort, but I'm so pleased to see Detroit coming back.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about that was when you graduated college, before you ended up at Microsoft, did you consider coming back to Detroit and working here?
I did, absolutely. I worked a couple of years, went back to Stanford to business school, and was trying to decide kind of what to do between summer of first year and summer of second year. And the then president of Ford, Don Peterson, had gone to Stanford Business School. So I sent him a note and said, can I talk to you over Christmas? I'm curious about the auto industry. So I was talking to him about potentially coming back to work at Ford for that summer between first and second year. And then I got a call from a buddy of mine from college, Bill Gates, and it detoured me some off of the Ford Motor Company route that I was considering.
And you left business school, Earl. You didn't finish.
I did. I dropped out after that 1 year.
So when you were making that decision, was the offer so, I guess it had to be so compelling? What was the thought process when you said weighing staying in school versus grabbing the offer immediately and going to Microsoft?
Yeah, I don't think we have many college-age kids here, so I'll say something that'll probably offend all the potential parents. It turns out that dropping out of school is not as bad as they tell you. You know why? You know why? Well, forget my experience. They'll always let you drop back in. So, it's a low-risk way to try entrepreneurship, truly. Although I know most parents probably, my dad didn't believe it. I told my dad, who was an immigrant, never went to college, yeah, Dad, I'm dropping out of business school, isn't that great? And my dad was not a happy camper. But Bill was the smartest person I'd ever met. I knew they were world leaders in this new thing called software, because there wasn't much of a software business, and this new thing called personal computers. I was looking at Microsoft, Ford, an insurance company, consulting, and investment banking. I'd even tried. I actually know Arn's wife, Nancy, before I ever knew Arn. We worked together at Microsoft. But I actually spent a summer kind of sniffing out the movie business even.
As a screenwriter, right? You were thinking of screenwriting?
Oh, no. Oh. I can't write at all.
Okay.
No, I wanted to be a business guy.
Oh, okay.
I have a very short attention span, and the movie business seems like it'd be a good.
Oh, okay.
Basketball is good for people with ADD also. So.
I'm going to fast forward. past Microsoft. So you stepped down as CEO in 2014, and the Clippers came up coincidentally for sale that year, which became part of your next chapter. You bought the Clippers in later that year, and I remembered Nancy and I had dinner with you in Los Angeles right after you took ownership of the Clippers, and it was a fascinating dinner. You talked about your goals in this next chapter of your life was one of obviously building a successful basketball team, but you had many other personal goals, and one of them was philanthropy. And you and Connie founded the Ballmer Group a year later, I think in 2015. Talk about that, how that came to be, what your interests were in philanthropy. I know that evening we talked about one organization, City Year, which I think you and Connie have been big benefactors of, which we also support here in Detroit. Talk a little bit about City Year, but just talk about just how you and Connie came to that, why the Ballmer Group and what your focus was going to be and why then.
Yeah, Connie had done some philanthropy in Washington State, starting with foster kids, and it broadened out, and I retired, and she said, all right, dude, it's time to dive in with me. I was a little tired. It's a long story, but suffice it to say, I didn't prevail in that discussion. And as we thought about what to do, the thing, building on what Connie had already done and my interests, there are people who have, and I'll just call it, no real shot at the American dream from the day they're born. And it's not because who they are or what their capabilities are, but by the circumstances of their birth, whether it's dysfunctional family issues or lack of good education, it's just not possible. And there's plenty of data that supports that. And that's not fair, at least in my estimation. I don't know how the world solves poverty or some of these other issues, but every kid deserves a chance. And we decided that would be what we focused in on, and that's what came under this rubric of economic mobility, which is as broad as you can think. I mean, we are a mile wide and an inch deep. We view that as our strategic value. And why philanthropy? Look, we were blessed with a lot financially. Things worked out great at Microsoft, and it would be, in a sense, irresponsible if we hadn't picked something of this ilk to go do. There's a couple new areas that we're considering, but we're anchored in this notion of giving every kid a shot.
Right. And talk a little bit about City Year, because that was the first organization we talked about that night, and I think Andrew Stein may be in the somewhere sitting here, and who ran City Year here in Detroit, now works for the national organization in fundraising. So why City Year? What did it mean to you and Connie? And
yeah, and I'll focus. We have, I think now, well over 300 grantees now. But City Year, and I don't remember them all. I might have as a younger man, but I don't remember all now. But City Year lodges big. They are so effective going into schools, supporting kids, supporting teachers in the school, helping kids in ways that, the teacher doesn't have time. Teacher just simply doesn't have time to work in enough depth with kids. And this kind of additional school support is what City Year does, and it resonates perfectly. Obviously, they're not going into Birmingham public schools. They will go into less affluent schools. They work with kids who need that kind of help. And it would be characteristic of a number of institutions we support. But we started out actually supporting nationally. We support in Los Angeles, obviously now in Detroit. We're active in addition nationally in 3 places. Seattle area, which is where we live, Los Angeles, which is where we have our basketball team, and Detroit, because it's the place I grew up. Connie grew up in the Northwest, so Seattle's close to home.
Great. I wanted to talk a little bit as we continue on your philanthropy in Detroit specifically. You also have, I guess with Kylie, developed a close relationship with the Detroit Regional Chamber. And and you're really collaborating on a number of different initiatives regarding education and growing talent in this area. So maybe you can talk a little bit about those efforts and what you're doing.
Yeah, specifically with the Chamber, we've had a mutual interest in getting kids to get degrees. And so whether it's with Detroit Drives Degrees, the Hazel Park Promise, the Detroit Promise, which work to make sure people are funded through at least 2 years of school, the Michigan College Access Network, that has been a joint passion with the Chamber. We've provided grant money to those institutions, and it's been one of our Chamber-based focus. You know, we've got a project now with SEMCA on workforce training for opportunity youth, kids 16 to 24 who are out of the workforce. Another one that should be of interest to the Chamber, by the way, given the focusing on employment. But the specific work with the Chamber, I think, is very important, very valuable.
No, it's great. It's a great partnership, and obviously I know the Chamber values this partnership tremendously and looking forward to doing great things with you going forward. And speaking of that, because it seems like you've had a strategy of really looking for key partnerships, and making sure the partnerships are really structured in a way that they're working with government, business, that you can leverage a lot of opportunities. So go into sort of, as you identify organizations you support, you and Connie, how you pick them and how you evaluate them and determine whether they're going to be successful.
Yeah, I'll give you just a couple examples. There's an organization based in Detroit. It's an amazing not-for-profit. It's called Civilla. And Civilla is I'll call it a software design company. Now, but what do they really do? They've worked, for example, in partnership with the Michigan State Department of Health and Human Services on re-engineering, redesigning. They don't do the software, they do the human design of the application form to sign up for benefits programs like SNAP or food stamps, as it's sometimes called, unemployment benefits, Medicaid. How do you make it easier for somebody to apply and get approved? And I think they took the application down online, but from here to here, the time in which somebody can get approved from their benefits, the quality of customer service they get has really improved, so fewer people fall, if you will, between the cracks. But they work in partnership with government, as an example, in order to get their work done. You know, I talked about this stuff with SEMCA and workforce issues that they are working on Wayne County, which I think is another good example. There's an area in which we have a lot of passion, which is community violence. I can't imagine, because I never grew up in a neighborhood where there was violence, but there are places a kid goes to elementary school, and you have to be very worried about getting to school and violence in the schools. And we've seen a lot of stuff in the paper of late, but that can be an everyday thing for kids in some neighborhoods. And we were approached recently by a group of 4 not-for-profits, the Health Alliance Violence Intervention Group, the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform, Cities United, I won't remember the name off the top of my head of the 4th. They want to help stem the kind of shooting violence that we see. And we're not on this side talking about police activity, we're talking about community. And they figured out there's a very small percentage of people who shoot or get shot in most tough neighborhoods. And if you can focus in on that in the right way, good things happen. So for example, let's make sure we approach somebody who's been shot right there when they're in their hospital, them and their families. How do we use that to provide support, to tamp down retribution work? How do you put gang outreach workers into neighborhoods so that they can be part of tamping down outreach workers with the gangs who are basically ex-gang members? How do you work with police in this network? If it's a small group of people, how do you identify them and provide case management services? It's a cool thing, because if you can reduce the amount of violence, and of course, you know, disproportionately this happens in poorer neighborhoods, good things can happen. We supported them nationally. They'll be coming here to Detroit to find partners to work with in the Detroit area. And I'm just super excited about community violence and the opportunity to partner with, the Detroit Police and the other institutions. There's a project that we were excited about. I think we funded at Sinai Grace now Hospital with workers who work right there in the hospital already with shooting victims. And so I've got a lot of enthusiasm, for example, about that and the application here in
And who brought this idea to you about dealing with gang violence? How did it all sort of emanate?
We have one of our, in this case, the woman who runs, as Kylie has the job running all of our operation here in Michigan, we have a woman who does the same thing in Los Angeles. She and one of our other folks were approached by these folks. Super interesting concept. We said, well, you really have to be able to spread nationally, but why don't you start in Detroit and LA, because those are places with which we have affinity. So that's how it came about.
You sort of alluded to sort of data-driven analysis as you do sort of your granting. And I'm fascinated by, you started usafacts.org in, I think, 2017. And to evaluate the government spending, taxes. Just tell us a little bit how that got started and how it's worked since its inception.
Well, I guess I'll complete the story about our philanthropy. I said to Connie when she said, come on, get involved, I said, nah. Government takes care of all those issues. And of course, I told you who prevailed, but as many people do when they're on the sort of opposite of the argument, I said, I'm going to prove this to her. I'm going to figure out how much government is really transferring wealth and helping in these issues. And I started looking for government data. That's the definitive data. How does government spend its money? Then I got interested in how it raises money. Then it gets you interested in whether government is getting good outcomes with its money. And I started to say, what do I need? And as a former CEO of a company, what I really wanted to see is every company has to file something called the 10K report with the Securities and Exchange Commission. There's no fluff in it. There's no forecasts in it. There's no hope for the future in it. It's just the facts. Here's my company, here's my numbers, here's what we've accomplished, boom, 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 boom. And there's no frou-frou. I wanted one. I wanted to read that document to understand. It didn't exist. And so I said to myself, I wonder if we can create this kind of thorough, comprehensible document, factual, no forecasts. People can, there's an old line, everybody's entitled to their own opinions, but not everybody's entitled to their own facts. Well, what happened in the past is factual. At least in things that you can characterize in numbers, they are factual. Write them down. So we set out to do that, and we did. Now, if you want to understand government in the country, you have to understand not federal government, but state and local. If I asked you, for example, who paid for Grand River? Who paid for Grand River Avenue? Was it the county? Was it the city? Was there any federal money involved? So if you really want to understand government, you have to look at the totality of federal, state, and local governments. So we put this thing together. We published the first version in 2017. Now we publish an annual report like company does. And then we've gotten into producing a range of content. Our COVID data, county by county, was used by the CDC early on in the pandemic because we were doing a better job of data collection than others. And so we've built out a range of visualizations, content. I want us to be the definitive source of content, and I want to be an organization that can bring the history, the facts of what has happened. And I like numbers. I am a numbers person, and with respect to all government officials in the audience, politicians like to grab a number out of context and make a point. And D's, R's, everybody independence, everybody likes to do it. Heck, I do it in my personal life sometimes. But if you say to somebody, hey, we're doubling the budget, we're going to double the budget for this department. Let's say total government spends whatever, 100, and you say we're going to double, and then everybody, oh, double's awesome. But if you say to somebody we're going to go from spending 1 of 100 to 2 out of 100, that is numerical context. You can still decide you agree, you disagree, but it is more helpful. Yeah. And that's where we were. Sorry, I got a lot of passion.
No.
It's fine. But that's where we came from. USA Fast. Session jointly, bipartisan, supported by Senator Romney as well as Senator Schumer. We had about 25 senators come through, which is quite remarkable because people discussion. I'm going to read you a quote just because I love it. People like to point back to the founding of the country and our government, and people will point to free speech and gun ownership and the Bill of Rights. There's 2 things people often don't talk about as much. From the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if you think about for example, the kids that were shot last week, their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, that's of course a tragedy for the kids who were shot and not. But the quote, which relates directly to this notion of facts, comes from James Madison, one of the framers of the Constitution, which I think is relevant. And I brought it just so I could read it. A popular government of acquiring it is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy or both. And a people who mean to be their own governors, in other words, a democracy, must arm themselves with the power that knowledge gives. I knew from the start. You have to have a State of the Union address. This notion of the importance of facts and information for people to govern themselves, it is essential. And I am
legislators are in this room listening.
Yeah. So I'm passionate about it. I think it's fundamental to our democracy and
as important as the rule of law. So we're running out of time, and I have to. There's one topic we have to talk about is sports. We can't end a conversation, at least with me here and you here.
Go Clips!
Yeah. Go Pistons.
Oh, and when they're not playing the Clips, go Pistons!
But I wanted to ask you just about your experience and maybe contrasting it. You now own the team 7 years. What's the difference in owning a sports team versus running a company like Microsoft? Give us your have you enjoyed the experience? What's your thoughts on it?
No, it's great. It's specifically great in that it's sort of like being a super fan. It's not quite like being at one of your kids' games, which is always sort of the most passionate basketball experience, but you get the passion. It's actually a very complicated business. The business side is complicated, and the sports side is far more complicated. I get as complicated spreadsheets on our salary cap situation as basically anything I got at Microsoft, as Arn would know, and I like that about it. We're building a new arena in Los Angeles which is a lot of fun. I have more points of view on what makes for a good sports experience, even than I did what makes a good software product, which is a lot of fun. The one thing that I guess I really appreciated more, business is very accountable. Quarterly results, a lot of accountability. If you want an experience understanding accountability, own a sports team. Every 24 seconds, our players can get a grade. Every 24 seconds. You know, people talk about transparency. There's radical transparency in sport. There's literally almost nothing that I know that our fans don't know. They can look at the same analytics, the same statistics, the same games. So in terms of transparency and accountability, if I'd been doing this when I ran Microsoft, I would have gotten tuned up. You know, business talks about accountability. You talk about accountability in basketball, one of the top things that you'll hear coaches and players talk about is holding each other accountable. And that doesn't mean just saying, oh, are you okay? It means, God, darn it, you know, you need to stay up with this guy, or you need to ask for help.
Right.
And it's real time. And so this notion of having hard conversations, of being accountable, of getting results, you really learn a lot through sports.
And do you think there's more attention on you as an owner in this than before in Microsoft? What about the public aspect of it? Because it seems like my experience in sports has been every day is, you know, you're covered, it's in the news. Fans are so passionate about it. So how would you say that for you, that experience? Has it been different from Microsoft in that regard, or no?
Well, it's obviously different. Connie would say probably it's more with basketball. I would have said, you have to understand, software as a profession is the #2 profession in the United States by numbers, and across the globe even more. And there's a lot of software, both fanboys and haters. Just like you'd have in, oh, I love Windows. Windows sucks. And at least among that community of huge numbers of tech people, you know, I got that same scrutiny, but it wasn't like the person on the street who will say, LA's bad and much worse than Detroit in this way. We've got 2 professional basketball teams, which means not everybody in the city cheers for you.
Right.
That kind of, I hate it. And I would probably have to admit, we haven't won any championships and those other guys have, so we're like, we got to be the #2 who just tries harder. But that gets you a different kind of attention too. It's a little different public posture, I would say.
No, and I have no doubt you're going to get there very soon. You have a great team, and I know with your passion, they're going to be a contending team for a long time. I think I'm getting the signal that they're going to start playing music soon, like the Academy Awards. I wanted to thank you and Connie. And commitment to Detroit is unmatched. We so appreciate you being here. It was an honor for me to be here with you. You're a dear friend. We want you to stay involved. I know you will. Thanks so much for you and Connie being here. Kylie, it's great. Thank you so much.
Good luck, everybody. Thanks,